Hello, Mr. Gimblett. I'm Sam Blyth in 7A this year, and last year at Grammar. I'm going to be interviewing you, Max Gimblett, one of New Zealand's most famous artists, and a grammar old boy of 1950. Welcome.
Thank you.
So we'll get into the questions. First one, why did you choose to come to Grammar?
I went to King's Prep as a boarder for 2 years, and I was told that Grammar was inspired. Grammar was the school to go to. I never considered going to King's College. And also I lived in Grafton, so I could walk to school. And the biggest thing, I think, was learning that Grammar was inspired. And of course, when I arrived in Grammar, the great Viking Hall and the great building truly inspired me.
Yeah, brilliant.
And still does to this day.
Yeah, it's a wonderful building with all the heritage, the many names of old boys, and much of your art around the walls as well.
Wonderful, yeah.
What were your main interests within grammar, such as your
Well, I was in 3A General and then 4A General. My biggest course that I enjoyed was social studies. I've forgotten the man's name, but I think he went on to become headmaster at one point. He was a beautiful person. And then my great passion was rugby, which I'd gone to Grafton Primary. I started playing rugby when I was 10, and I played rugby in England, and I toured Germany, and I played rugby till I was about 28. I was a loose head prop, and in the 6th grade I represented Auckland. The other interest was I enjoyed playing fives. Do you know what fives is? The fives courts, the long concrete, yeah. So I played with Terry McNamara, who was a year ahead of me. And later on, Terry McNamara became the leading art critic for the Herald, and he used to review my shows. So we started at Auckland Grammar together, and we played fives. We played fives on all of our breaks and lunchtime. So I think my passion was the other boys. Ron Carter was in my class of Carter Engineering. And there was guys who were playing top level tennis at the age of 14 or 15, and Wilson Winneray was the captain of the rugby team, and he used to be the halfback. He went on to captain the All Blacks, and Wilson Winneray and I had cocktails together some many years later, and I said to him, Wilson, you're one of my examples. You're one of my inspirations. And he looked at me and said, Max, you are my inspiration. He said, I'm trying to do watercolors.
Yeah.
Which are difficult to do.
Yeah.
So beautiful man. Yeah. So the other boys, were, really like, there had been boys at King's Prep that I thoroughly enjoyed also. Brilliant boys, and the same at Auckland Grammar.
Yeah.
And then the other thing that was good was Little John was the headmaster, and 4A General Room Headmaster was Mr. Kelly, and Mr. Kelly played fullback for Auckland. So, that was a stunning relationship. I had so much respect for him. And basically, I did well in all subjects. I was top of the class in Grafton Primary. I came in second in 4A General, but when we hit bookkeeping, I discovered I was dyslexic. And it's a fact that a lot of visual artists are dyslexic. They make up for their thing by being visual.
Yeah.
But we did bookkeeping, and I couldn't do the debit and credit. I couldn't go across. It wouldn't happen.
Yeah. You once said in an interview that because you left school when you were 16, you wish you'd spent more time at Grammar. What makes Grammar stand out for you?
Well, I actually left school at 15. My mother took me out of grammar. Mr. Littlejohn called my mother and I in, and he said, Max needs to stay. He's a very good student. Don't take him away. And my mother said, he's going to get a job. And my mother didn't need the money, but she was having a relationship with some man who was influencing her. And he said there was a position at a ladies' coat, suit and frock company, and I could be a salesman there. So I was taken out of grammar after 2 years, which was actually a bit of a disaster to do that to me, because I was promising, hadn't hit a very high level of rugby or cricket, and I had to leave. So it's mainly the what rubs off from the other boys and the teachers, and it was about discipline, it was about concentration, and it was about inspiration. And it was very pure. It was very pure. We were talking about 1950. It wasn't screwed up politically at all. The country wasn't screwed up. I mean, that's my memory. Politically, it was very sound. I may be wrong in thinking that. So it was a very, very good experience for me, and it was cut short.
Yeah, unfortunately.
So I went to night school, and I did a 3-year course in money, banking and finance at Seddon Memorial Technical College and became an associate of the New Zealand Institute of Management. And then when I got to the States, I became a Jungian, and I started going to Carl Jung's foundation twice a week in the evenings. And I studied Jung psychology for like 20 years and have had 2 Jungian psychologists analyze me. I've been in an analysis twice, which I just love.
Yeah. Have you always had an interest in art? And what was your experience with art at grammar?
Well, I had no art at grammar. I have no memory of any art. I don't think there were art classes. There may have been, but I've repressed it. I had no memory. At King's Prep, there was art classes, and I was at the bottom of the group. I was like 1 out of 10. I couldn't do anything. And the year I went to King's Prep was the polio epidemic. So I was at the Bay of Islands being safe, and I got correspondence courses. And amongst the correspondence courses was art. And I was hopeless. So when I was 25 in Canada, I'd been mixing with writers in London, and I thought I might be a writer. I tried to write, and I found it very difficult to do. Couldn't really write. I wrote some short stories, but wasn't convinced they were any good. And I got to know a painter in Toronto, and he took me to visit a potter, a ceramist. And the potter looked at me and said he needed an apprentice. And I said, what would the deal be? And he said, you'd work here 8 hours a day, 6 days a week. You wouldn't get paid a penny. And after a year, I'd let you make your first pot. And I said, I'm your man. So I did a pottery apprenticeship for 2 years, and then I went to the San Francisco Art Institute to learn painting. Now, the reason I became a painter was I was drawing myself in a mirror with a Conte crayon, and I drew a self-portrait, a very good likeness. I'd learned to catch a likeness. And my wife came home from university and said, you're a painter? And I said, yes, I am.
Yeah. Well,
it was a convincing moment. But I was a highly unlikely painter because, I was trained as a textile salesman. So I was basically a salesman and a business type. But I later learned that Carl Jung said, when you're 28, you learn what you're going to do with your life. And I started painting when I was 28.
Yeah.
And I'm 85 now, and I've painted quite a long
time. Well, since your time at grammar, the art's really taken off, definitely because of your influences. All third formers now take art classes, and many students carry it through all the way to 7th form. Which
yes. I've actually done some Sue Ink workshops and some teaching at grammar. The art's first class now. But I don't really think it was in 1950. I don't think so. If it was, I didn't notice it. It escaped me.
Yeah, no, I
But
can imagine that.
I'm sure it wasn't offered.
Yeah, well, it's definitely due to your influence. I think it's definitely taken off since then.
Yeah, that's very good.
Are there any memories from your time at Grammar that you channel into your art?
Well, I've already mentioned some of them. I think it's the level of passion of being concentrated and listening and learning, classically poised, knowing that something serious you need to do with your life. Because you got that from the masters. The masters were very, I think it's fair to say they're pure. It's a pure situation, in a pure regard. I have great admiration for the masters. And the other boys, the standards were very high. Boys were really accomplishing things. I went to school with Paul Mortensen, who lived in my street. He's still a close friend. And I had other friends. And I was captain of the cricket team in my last year. What was the question?
Just your experience at Grammar and how that influences your art.
That's a bit of a long shot. I don't know that it does, other than keeping to the point, being disciplined.
Yeah, well, I'm sure all the grammar virtues guides anyone in their life. And if it's not specific memories, then it's just the whole culture of the school cultivates you into it.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
That's the right word to use, the culture. The culture of the school. The culture of the school is tremendous.
Yeah.
And I have a friendship now with the headmaster, who's just an incredible person. And I go to, meetings with people, and it's altogether very stirring, and it's by far and away probably the best high school in Australasia. It's just superb.
What prompted you to devote your career to the artistic world?
Well, I knew that I had something serious to do, and I tried to write, and I basically couldn't. And I tried the business world, and it didn't satisfy me, because I don't have a profound interest in money.
Yeah.
Capitalism is a little bit of a problem, becoming more of a problem in this country all the time. It's really a question of knocking off the things you didn't want to do to discover something central and pure. And once I started drawing, I realized I actually had quite a lot of talent. I understood that I needed to catch a likeness, so I could draw you now in half an hour, and you would recognize yourself. The book is The Natural Way to Draw by Nicolaitis, is the Bible on that. And Eugene Delacroix, the great French gestural painter, said, if you're an artist, you need to be able to draw a man as he falls from the 8th floor to the ground. You need to be able to draw him in that time. So, that's a very high skill. So basically, artists get permission from other artists to do things. And artists don't really invent all that much. They add on a little bit to the history of art. But basically, it's about centering yourself and understanding where you fit in the history of art. Because the history of art's very long and very powerful, and you're lucky if you can enter it. And so I've done that. I've got my 7th book being produced at the moment. I've had 6 books printed. I've been very fortunate. I made a very brilliant marriage 57 years ago to a Jewish scholar who's the top person in the world on the authority of Jewish museums. Top person in the world. And Barbara gives Zoom lectures to 5,000 people at a time. So the pandemic has actually been quite good for us because we've been able to concentrate.
Yeah.
I've done a lot of good painting and I've done very well with it. Produced prints and drawings. It's been good. I've got a studio manager that's been with me 22 years. It's a brilliant person.
Oh yes, you've definitely made your mark on the artistic, the history of art, and in both in New Zealand and the world.
Yeah, well, I've been fortunate. I mean, I have kept my concentration, and I've kept my nose to it, and you know, I'm brought up Presbyterian Church of Scotland, and I took my Zen Buddhist vows in 2006. I'm a Zen priest.
Yeah.
So I've always been spiritual. I had a very, very beautiful experience at St. David's as a boy with Owen Barrack-Waneth, the minister. And I know his grandson, Paul, now, and I've been able to help save St. David's Church. And gave them a check for $1 million from the sale of my brass quatrefoils. So, you know, New Zealand has remained at the center of my vision. I became an American citizen because I had to be in terms of taxes and everything, but I'm not an American in New Zealand. I'm very, very loyal and very patriotic. And also, it's been a little bit of sad. I haven't visited New Zealand for like 18 months to 2 years. And this is the first time in, I don't know, since 1970, first time started, I've been to New Zealand 60 times, 60.
Yeah. So, yeah, you're back and forth a lot.
Yeah, once or twice a year.
So what do you attribute the success of your career to? And would you have any advice for budding artists?
Well, there's a few things. Not to panic if you don't realize you're an artist when you're 16, not to panic. If you go to art college, consider taking an art therapy degree, because that way you'll probably have a job. Most art students, when they come out of college, don't have any income at all and have to do whatever. So consider doing art therapy. You get just as much art, but you'll have a job. When you have a practice, you must have a studio. You're not an artist unless you have a studio. And you need to connect with the culture of the world. So you need to go to very good museums regularly, like 2 or 3 times a week. Take a sketchbook with you and sketch paintings that seem important to you. The reality of art is in the museums. The museum is the anima, the female principle that received the object. And the other thing you need to do, which is important, is you need to make contact with your peer artists, people of a similar age, and form a critique group, and have people to your studio once every, on a 2-week basis. Go to somebody's studio. Like, it could be 8 or 10 people in the group, and then they come to yours, because basically you can't do this alone. It can't be done alone. It's too demanding. It's too large. It's too, and then of course the art world is inundated with the business with capitalism. So you have to get some sort of a grasp on what you're going to do for income until you hopefully start to sell your work. And the percentage of artists that sell their work compared to the percentage of artists that paint is probably too small.
Yeah.
Unfortunately. It's good to be an artist in New Zealand, because my feeling about New Zealand is, rightly or wrongly, it's just a guess, but I think New Zealand might have the highest proportion of private collectors per head of population of any country in the world. And that's my experience with my art. Like, hundreds of people have it.
Yeah.
And I will go along to one of my openings, and a couple will approach me and say, Max, we want something of yours for our home.
Mm.
You know, a tear trickles down my cheek.
Yeah.
Can't believe it.
Mm.
Can't believe it. And last time I got onto Air New Zealand, I climbed aboard business class, and there was a Maori stewardess, and she said, welcome, Mr. Gimblett. And then she looked at me and she said, why are you crying, Mr. Gimblett? And I said, it's your dialect. So when I hear New Zealand spoken like you're speaking it today, that's an absolute thrill for me.
Yeah.
Because it's my language.
Yeah. I'm sure you'd miss it after a long time away.
Long time. The biggest thing I've missed in this pandemic is going home. Because, I have a big show in Auckland next June, and I think it's doubtful that my wife and I will be going.
Yeah.
I mean, it's getting worse in this country, not better.
Mm.
I mean, it's hard to know that far ahead.
Yeah.
But it's a very big deal. It's worldwide, and a lot of people are, countries having revolutions, countries, immigration's all stuffed up, flow of goods is stuffed up.
Mm.
The rich are getting richer.
Yeah.
It's all it's very screwy.
Mm. Out of all the art donations you've made to the school, and there are quite a few, which one would be your favourite?
Oh, I think the group of inks that are along the wall, the Sumai inks, Stations of the Cross.
Mm.
I think probably, there's a very good painting there too, a 60-inch quatrefoil is in the hall around the corner, but I think probably the inks. And next time I come to Auckland, I'll of course do a Sumai ink workshop with the students again.
Yeah. And
the headmaster comes and he draws.
Yeah.
He's pretty good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Finally, what advice would you give to grammar students? I'm a great believer in education. I'd say everybody that can manage it, go to university. Don't end your education at high school. Go to university. And don't worry about the subject, just let the subject come to you. Take your time with the subject, but you actually can't have too much education. That people that want to go on to a PhD, I thoroughly encourage that. But certainly go to university. Don't take a job. Don't go to school. I mean, that's my advice. My advice is continue your education. Mm.
Because in education is what will separate you from a lot of other people in the world. I mean, it will give you a form of the truth, because you can think. I mean, our mind is our biggest capacity. The mind generates the body. The mind comes first. So to train one's mind is really, it makes me think of Indian gurus like Krishnamurti and Sri Nisargadatta Maharaj. I mean, the mind is everything.
Mm. So,
like they say, a mind goes to waste. Yeah, don't end school just because you get to the 7th form. Go to university. Are you going to university?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Good man. Good man. Yeah, that's the thing to do. I mean, Auckland University?
Otago.
Otago.
Yeah.
Wow, great. Live away from home. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you for joining us today. It's been wonderful to have this chat for you. So deepest thanks from myself, from the Headmasters Heritage Committee, from the Old Boys Association, and from all of Grammar.
Very welcome.
Thanks.
Nice to be with you, Sam.